I never thought a simple vegetable garden would turn my quiet suburban life into a battleground, but when you live in Oak Ridge Estates, the seemingly innocent act of planting tomatoes can apparently become a declaration of war. The first knock on my door came at 7:30 a.m. on a Saturday, just as I was enjoying my first cup of coffee. I'd moved in 3 months ago, a retired Army veteran looking for peace and quiet after 20 years of service. The small 3-bedroom ranch-style home wasn't fancy, but it had good bones and a spacious backyard where I could finally pursue my dream of growing my own vegetables. Mr. Yates? I'm Karen Millsworth, president of the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. She didn't wait for me to invite her in, simply pushed past me into my foyer. Her perfectly highlighted blonde bob didn't move an inch as she turned to face me. We need to discuss your garden situation. I closed the door slowly, trying to process what was happening. Good morning to you too, Ms. Millsworth. What garden situation? It's Mrs. Millsworth, she corrected with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. And I'm referring to that unsightly vegetable patch you've installed in clear violation of our community guidelines. I blinked, genuinely confused. Before purchasing the home, I'd read through the HOA covenant carefully. There was nothing prohibiting gardens. I'm sorry, but there's no rule against gardens in the HOA agreement. Karen's perfectly manicured hand waved dismissively. Section 12, paragraph 3 clearly states that all landscape modifications must be approved by the board. You never submitted plans for approval. For a vegetable garden? In my backyard? Rules are rules, Mr. Yates. The board has determined your garden extends beyond your property line into the community green space. It needs to be removed by Monday. I felt my military training kick in, stay calm, assess the situation, gather intelligence. I'd like to see where exactly you believe my garden crosses the property line. Karen's smile tightened further as she led me through my own house to the back door. Once outside, she pointed imperiously at my neat rows of tomatoes, peppers, and zucchini plants. Everything past that spruce tree is community property. The garden has to go. I stared at the spot she indicated, then back at her. Ma'am, that spruce is at least 15 feet inside my property line. Our records indicate otherwise. She pulled out her phone and showed me a crudely marked up satellite image. This is the official property division. Something wasn't right here. I have my survey documents from when I purchased the home. Would you like to see them? A flash of something, annoyance? Concern, crossed Karen's face before her professional mask slipped back into place. That won't be necessary. Our records supersede any documentation you might have. Monday, Mr. Yates. Or you'll be facing daily fines. After she left, I called my neighbor, Tara Osborne, who had lived in Oak Ridge Estates for over a decade. I'd met her shortly after moving in, and she'd been nothing but kind, even bringing over a housewarming basket filled with local treats. Oh, Yorick! Tara sighed when I explained what had happened. Karen's on the warpath again. You're not the first she's targeted. What do you mean? Karen's been HOA president for 6 years. During that time, she's managed to expand the community green space by intimidating homeowners into giving up parts of their yards. Most people don't fight it because the fines are outrageous. I frowned. That can't be legal. It's not, but fighting an HOA is expensive and exhausting. Most folks just cave. Well, I'm not most folks, I said, feeling my resolve strengthen. 20 years in the Army had taught me a thing or two about standing my ground. I have my land surveyed from when I bought the place. There's no way I'm removing my garden. Be careful, Tara warned. Karen has a way of making life difficult for those who cross her. I spent the weekend researching HOA laws and preparing my defense. Monday morning arrived with another knock at my door. This time, Karen wasn't alone. A balding man in an ill-fitting suit stood beside her, along with 2 younger women clutching tablets. Mr. Yates, this is our HOA attorney, Gerald Walsh, and our compliance officers, Karen announced. Since you've failed to remove the garden, we're here to issue your first fine and schedule the removal, which will also be billed to you. I smiled politely and held up a folder. Before we proceed, I'd like to show you something. I pulled out the land survey certificate and unfolded it on my entryway table. This is the official land survey conducted when I purchased this home 3 months ago. As you can see, my property line extends a full 25 feet beyond that spruce tree you pointed out on Saturday. Karen's face flushed. Your records are incorrect. I interrupted firmly but politely. This survey was conducted by a licensed professional and filed with the county. I also took the liberty of checking the county records for the official subdivision plat. I pulled out another document. The community green space doesn't border my property at all. There's actually a 10-foot utility easement between us. The attorney, Gerald, leaned forward to examine the documents. His expression shifted from confident to concerned in seconds. Karen's face had gone completely still, frozen in a mask of disbelief. The silence stretched uncomfortably until she finally found her voice. There must be some mistake. The association has maintained that area for years. No mistake, I said calmly. And I have to wonder why the HOA would claim ownership of land that clearly belongs to homeowners. Especially since I've heard I'm not the first person you've approached about this. Gerald cleared his throat nervously. Perhaps we should discuss this at the next board meeting, Karen. There's nothing to discuss, Karen snapped. Our records have been consistent for years. An idea struck me. How many other homeowners have you told to remove structures or landscaping from supposedly communal land? Karen's eyes narrowed. That's HOA business and none of your concern. Actually, came a voice from behind the group. I think it's very much our concern. Tara Osborne stood on my front walk, accompanied by at least a dozen neighbors. When Yorick told me what was happening, I started asking around. Turns out, Karen's been claiming private property as HOA land for years. My backyard lost 8 feet to this community green space scam 3 years ago. An older gentleman stepped forward. Lost 12 feet of my yard. Been paying to maintain it for the HOA ever since. Karen's frozen expression cracked into something closer to panic. This is ridiculous. The board has proper documentation, which I'd love to see compared to the county records, I interjected. Because according to my research, the HOA has been systematically encroaching on private property throughout Oak Ridge Estates. Gerald tugged at Karen's elbow. We should go. Now. But Karen wasn't backing down. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Mr. Yates. I can make your life very uncomfortable. Is that a threat? I asked quietly. The compliance officers exchanged uncomfortable glances and took a step back from Karen. I think we all deserve answers, Tara said firmly. There's an emergency HOA meeting tonight at the community center. 7 p.m. We expect the entire board to be there with all documentation regarding property lines. Gerald nodded quickly. Of course. We'll sort this out. He practically dragged Karen away, who was still glaring daggers at me. As they retreated, one of the neighbors approached me. I'm Frank Collins. Been here 15 years and lost 20 feet of my backyard to Karen's community space claims. You might have just blown the lid off something big here. How big? I asked. Well, Frank lowered his voice. The HOA collects special assessments for maintaining that community green space. Almost $200 per household annually. With 127 homes in Oak Ridge. That's over $25,000 a year. I calculated quickly. For 6 years, Tara added. And I've never seen more than basic mowing happening on those areas. I looked at the group of neighbors gathered on my lawn. I think we need to do some serious digging before that meeting tonight. The next several hours were a flurry of activity. Neighbors brought over their property documents. We created a makeshift war room in my dining area, spreading out surveys, plats, and HOA financial statements that several residents had requested over the years but never fully examined. The picture that emerged was troubling. Over the past 6 years, Karen Millsworth had systematically claimed portions of at least 47 backyards as community green space. The HOA had collected over $150,000 in special assessments for maintenance, but the financial records showed only about $30,000 in actual landscape expenditures. Where did the rest of the money go? Tara wondered aloud, examining the financial statements. Good question, I said. But I think I found something even more interesting. I pointed to a line item buried in the quarterly reports. Lake house renovations. $22,000 last year alone. Lake house? The HOA doesn't own a lake house, Frank said, frowning. Another neighbor, Elaine Turner, looked up from her tablet. No, but Karen Millsworth does. She has a vacation home at Lake Murray. She posts pictures from there all the time on social media. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Then everyone started talking at once. We need to call the police. My contractor could pull property records. We should contact a lawyer. I whistled sharply, silencing the room. Old army habits die hard. Let's be methodical about this. First, we need proof, not just suspicion. Second, we need to present our findings clearly at tonight's meeting. And third, we need to understand exactly what laws might have been broken here. By the time 7 p.m. rolled around, our improvised investigation had yielded disturbing results. We'd documented systematic property encroachment, questionable financial expenditures, and what appeared to be blatant misappropriation of HOA funds. We'd also discovered that Karen's husband, Phil Millsworth, owned a landscaping company contracted to maintain the supposedly communal areas, a clear conflict of interest never disclosed to homeowners. The community center was packed. Karen sat at the head table with the other board members, looking supremely confident again. Gerald Walsh sat beside her, nervously shuffling papers. Thank you all for coming, Karen began with practiced authority. We understand there's been some confusion about property lines in our community. It's not confusion, Karen, Tara interrupted, standing up. It's fraud. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. That's a serious accusation, Gerald cautioned. With serious evidence to back it up, I said, standing up with my folder of documents. May I approach the table? Gerald nodded, while Karen glared. I laid out the evidence methodically. The property surveys showing encroachment. The financial records showing discrepancies. The connection between the HOA funds and Karen's lake house renovations. The undisclosed business relationship with her husband's company. With each revelation, Karen's face grew paler, but she maintained her composure until I reached the lake house expenditures. This is absurd, she finally erupted. I have never used HOA funds for personal expenses. Then you won't mind if we conduct a forensic audit, Frank called out from the back. Because the numbers don't add up, Karen. Gerald was frantically whispering in Karen's ear now, but she shoved him away. I have given this community 6 years of my life, she shouted. I've created beautiful spaces where there were just unused sections of yards. I've increased property values. And this is the thanks I get? Those spaces weren't yours to create, I said calmly. They were on private property. Property you claimed belonged to the HOA. It's all for the good of the community, she insisted, her voice taking on a desperate edge. Everything I did was to improve Oak Ridge Estates. Including the $22,000 for your lake house? Tara asked pointedly. That was a temporary reallocation of funds, Karen snapped. I was going to pay it back. The room went deathly quiet. Even Gerald looked stunned. Karen seemed to realize what she'd admitted. She grabbed her purse and stood up. This meeting is adjourned. Actually, said a new voice from the doorway. It's not. A man and woman in business attire stepped into the room, flashing badges. Detective Wilson and Detective Park, County Financial Crimes Unit, the woman announced. We've been monitoring the situation after receiving some concerning documentation this afternoon. Mrs. Millsworth, we'd like you to come with us to answer some questions. Karen's face, which had been frozen in shock earlier that day, now crumpled in disbelief. You can't be serious. Deadly serious, Detective Wilson replied. We have enough evidence to suggest significant financial impropriety, and we need to secure records before they can be altered or destroyed. What happened next would become neighborhood legend. Karen made a dash for the side door, only to find it blocked by Frank Collins. She pivoted, heading for the main entrance, but slipped on the freshly waxed floor and crashed into the refreshment table, sending cookies and punch flying everywhere. As she struggled to her feet, dripping with red punch, Detective Parr calmly helped her up and quietly read her rights. The aftermath was both swift and thorough. A forensic audit revealed that Karen had misappropriated over $120,000 in HOA funds over 6 years. Her husband's landscaping company had been billing for services never rendered. The property line scheme had allowed them to systematically expand their control and justify increasing HOA fees and special assessments. 3 months later, I sat in my backyard, admiring my expanded vegetable garden. I'd had a proper fence installed right on the actual property line, reclaiming the full extent of my yard. Around me, neighbors were doing the same, building decks, installing play sets, and planting gardens on land that had been wrongfully claimed by the HOA. Tara stopped by, carrying a basket of fresh muffins. "Thought you might like these to go with your morning coffee," she said, settling into one of my patio chairs. "You're spoiling me," I laughed. "How's the new board working out?" After Karen's arrest, the entire HOA board had resigned. A new board led by Frank Collins had been elected with a mandate for transparency and minimal intervention. "Amazing what happens when decent people are in charge," Tara replied. "The new quarterly assessments are half what they used to be, now that we're not funding Karen's lake house." I nodded toward my thriving tomato plants. "And no one's complained about my garden." "On the contrary," Tara smiled. "There's talk of a community garden competition next summer. Frank thinks it would be good for neighborhood morale." I leaned back, feeling the sun on my face. After 20 years of military service, I'd finally found the peace I was looking for, ironically, only after fighting one last battle against an unexpected enemy. "You know," I said, "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm almost grateful to Karen Millsworth." Tara raised an eyebrow. "Why on earth would you be grateful to that woman?" I gestured around us, where neighbors were chatting across fences and children played freely in yards that had been reclaimed from Karen's falls. "Community space. Before all this happened, Oak Ridge Estates was just a collection of houses. Now it's actually become a community." Tara laughed and raised her coffee mug in a toast. "To Karen Millsworth, then. May she enjoy her new community at the minimum security women's correctional facility." We clinked mugs, and I gazed contentedly at my garden. The tomatoes were coming in nicely, and I'd already promised Tara the first batch for her famous marinara sauce. It wasn't the quiet retirement I'd imagined, but as I looked around at my new friends and my flourishing garden, I wouldn't have had it any other way.